Hi there, everybody. It's Susan here. I'm trying something a little bit new because after 12 years, almost day for day, of doing full moon meditations with the astrology attached, it doesn't seem to be working so well anymore. The online format is kind of hit and miss. So I'm going to just summarize the astrology part at least, and we'll see what we can do about the meditation get-togethers in some other format. So today is the full moon in Sagittarius, and it's an interesting full moon because it actually reaches back to the new moon in Sagittarius, which was also a total solar eclipse in December of 2020, on the 14th of December 2020. Both of these events are at 23 degrees of Sagittarius. That's where we see the connection. So whenever the planets come back to a similar degree, we're looking at a lot of recalling or some kind of trigger of an event that may have happened at that same degree. In 2020 particularly, 23 degrees was a significant number. That was where, for example, there was the conjunction of Pluto with Jupiter and Mars and Saturn. Sorry, I'm thinking on the run here. All of which were in Capricorn on the day of the lockdown. So you'll remember the 23rd of March. And so 23 degrees is quite significant for the whole of 2020 in many, many ways. And so now what we're doing is calling back what was going on at that time. So you might remember, for those of you who are paying a little bit of attention to the news, you'll remember that that was the month, or the lunar month at least, from mid-December till mid-January, in which there was an insurrection in Washington, for example. And that's quite interesting because, you know, we have this very strong energy of belief, and Sagittarius also is very much about issues around what we feel very strongly about in terms of our goals and life ambitions, the life path. Dharma could be another word for that. And Gemini, in this case of the full moon, which is in opposition to the sun, is very much about communication and thinking and exchanges. It's about learning things as well. Sagittarius is also learning. It's big life learning. It's big picture thinking. Gemini is very much about the details, about all the little things that we can pay attention to day by day. And Sagittarius is about the broader, expansive desires of looking abroad, for example, physically, wanting to be going somewhere like a pilgrimage, going to learn something from faraway lands, or philosophies and ideas from different countries, different cultures. And so where Gemini is more close to home, Sagittarius is much farther away. Sagittarius also represents law and justice. It's ruled by Jupiter, which is about divine justice. It's about the larger sense of justice, not human justice, which is more like Venus, but really the idea of what is just, what is fair. So I think the issues like that are going to be quite strong around this time. We've already been seeing it in the news leading up to this moment, and we'll continue to see that. So we can also see, and by the way, we've got this chart set for Brussels, so you may not be in Brussels. I know a lot of you are all over the place. So ignore the house placements, and we're only going to look at the signs. So that means that we just ignore for a moment that there's an ascendant in Virgo. That's not where we're putting our focus. And instead what we're looking at is the sun, for example, in Gemini, and the moon, which is in Sagittarius, in opposition to each other. And at the same time, we can see that the moon is in a sextile to Saturn, and that Saturn is in a trine to the sun. So when the sun is trining Saturn, that can give us a strong will. There can be a lot of force and desire to make a change, make a difference. Somebody's born with that aspect. It can make them very powerful, very willful, potentially also very self-centered, very selfish, or even shut down to other people's needs, hard to find empathy. But it can also stifle our goals. So sun can be blocked by Saturn. So even if this is a supported energy, there's a couple of other things in this full moon chart that tell me that there's some things that require a little bit of revision and rethinking. And so we see Saturn also in this favorable sextile to the moon, and it's really about, again, another possible way of stifling our emotions or not being really feeling safe, let's say, to express our emotions or express what it is that we feel particularly sensitive about. That can be a sense of internal blockage or an internal sort of censorship, or it can also be a feeling of being restricted by conditions or people around us. Saturn in Aquarius is very much about society. It's about what's going on in the collective. It's also with regards to science, in the purest sense of the word science, not in our contemporary sense of the word science, which is often a little bit skewered towards one particular way of seeing things, which often also has certain financial backing behind it. And so that's not what we're talking about here. It's real, the pure understanding of science, knowledge as well in different ways. Aquarius is very much about learning and knowledge in the same way that Jupiter represents that in Sagittarius. But Jupiter in Sagittarius is very much about higher knowledge. It's about our knowing. It's about knowing this inherent sense of truth, life truths, the big truths with the capital T. When the moon is in any kind of relationship with Saturn, we can also see that there can be issues around women that might be issues to do with women's issues in general, whether they be reproductive or in terms of issues going on with women around the world, or within a woman's experience where there can be issues around relationships with women, or potentially also women that are somehow forced to stand out or speak up due to some kind of restriction. So this is something that is highlighted at this time right now. I think we're expecting soon, I might be wrong about this, I think it might be something like the 21st of June that the Supreme Court of the United States was supposed to finally give their advice on Roe versus Wade. And that means that there would be potentially some change to the constitutional, so far, right for a woman to have an abortion, which in a domino effect affects all kinds of birth control and access to birth control, access to family planning. So this will certainly be something to come up in the next few days. And I think I remember the date of the 21st, which is actually Tuesday of next week. So coming up anyway. An interesting factor as well at this full moon is that Mars is conjunct Chiron at the same time. It's not really in relationship to this moon. We're not really seeing a close enough orb, or let's call it a gap. For those who are not familiar with the terminology, just the range, let's say, it's out of geometric range of both the sun and the moon at this time. But whenever there's something exactly happening at the time of a moon, it's really interesting because that's also describing something new. So Mars comes together with Chiron only about once every 2 years or so. And Mars and Chiron together can mean quite a number of things which pick up on the thread that I was just talking about, which is about feeling whether one feels that they can go ahead and assert themselves, or having a sense of needing in some ways to assert oneself. And I see it especially with Chiron there. Chiron in Aries is very much about self-esteem. It's about where we might be marching to the beat of somebody else's drum and not our own, and where we're not really feeling comfortable to express what it is that we really want to do. This is a generational aspect, because Chiron goes through signs for anywhere from 7 to 14 years. So Chiron in Aries is the generation that would be from, I think it's 1967 until something like 1976 or something like that. I can't remember exactly but let's say roughly that decade there. So people who are now in their late 40s and early 50s have this aspect, Chiron in Aries, and they're having their Chiron return. And so that can be, to an extent, it can be also symbolic, because Mars is there triggering that energy. Mars is very strong in Aries, it rules Aries. And therefore, it's really all about action and potentially sort of forcing this, forcing one to behave in a particular way that might sabotage oneself, or like you end up with a feeling of being, kind of a feeling of pushing yourself beyond your own limits, pushing yourself beyond what is actually healthy. And so that's something to think about in your own life. Certainly, it's something we need to think about collectively. Are we pushing ourselves beyond our limits, and are we in a situation where we're driving ourselves to self-destruct? So it can be also, with regards to Chiron, a healing of that tendency. It can be an awareness of it, so it's both the wound and the healing of the wound. It's an awareness of the tendency to sabotage, as well as the self-sabotage itself. And so where we look at that, where we explore it and say, well, actually, I see that in myself, or I see that in the world around me, so maybe I need to scale things back. Now action is required in a different way. So Mars is very much about action. And with this emphasis on Mars Chiron, yeah, we're looking at, I think, something to do with wellness, something to do with, what is it that we can be more conscious of in terms of what we want to achieve in our own healing and in healing our society. Aries is very gung-ho. That energy is very much in our consciousness right now, because since the middle of May, since the 11th of May, we've had Jupiter there as well. And Jupiter in Aries is very much about expanding into what we want and going for it, really reaching out in a bold new way. It's very pioneering energy. And so that energy is very much uppermost in our collective consciousness, as well as in our personal lives. So wherever you have Aries is where you're feeling that really strongly. And so that energy for some change, you're realizing something has to give, something has to change in the way that I behave, in the way that I do things in my day-to-day. Just I am a Cancer rising, for example, and so my midheaven and 10th house are Aries. And so just as an example, in the 10th house, that's around career. It's around how you show up in the world. So this is something that is now a new way. It's a new thing, a new way of being or showing up, because I'm seeing that the other way somehow is just done. It wasn't wrong. It's just no longer working in the way that it was before. So try to show up in new ways, trying to take action to reach out in a way or be somehow in the world in that way that is pioneering and different. For me, it's not necessarily, it's not even remotely pioneering or different in the context of broader society, given where people have already been doing this. But in terms of, I'm just speaking from the possibility that you might see in your own life. Or in my case, it's the 10th house. For example, if somebody is a Libra rising, it would be in the house of relationship, then the 7th house. So these are ways that you can see these things playing out, that they show up in your life. If you're an Aries rising, that's you. You're showing up very differently, and that you would have felt very strongly already in May, because Jupiter was there, and already back in 2018 when Chiron moved in there. So just to give you an example, so you can kind of play around with these ideas. So I'm coming back to this Saturn. The Saturn here is still, it's within orb. I feel that's 3 degrees orb of squaring the nodes at this time. It's not as tight as one would want it to be. So I'm calling that a sort of secondary influence. But Saturn squaring the nodes is another way of saying, you know, I know I want to go somewhere. I know I need to change something, perhaps based on my beliefs and based on what it is that I'd really like to change and do and be in my life. And yet I'm not really sure. I'm not really clear. And this is where we can jump in and see that Neptune is also there in a way, kind of clouding that judgment. Neptune is squaring the moon. It is almost exactly semi-sextile to Saturn, which is a challenging aspect. It's kind of like having somebody sitting too close beside you and you can't really see them, but you know that they're there. And so there's a kind of an ill at ease feeling with the semi-sextile. And so that is that feeling of, okay, you know, you've got this idea, you've got this goal, but can you do it? You know, Neptune is very much about the ideal, about the dream, about the thing that we really, really want, or the beauty that can come through creativity, for example, or fantasizing. It's deeply spiritual as well. But then Saturn steps in. And so look where Saturn is in your chart to find out where it is that you need to put yourself in order for any of that to be real. So yes, go ahead and plan and dream and have that idea. And yet at the same time, put your ducks in a row wherever you find Aquarius. And so that's something that is also a bit of a break on all of this tendency or this desire to kind of expand and reach out into something new. I'm not suggesting that this is not a time to change and grow and so on. On the contrary, it very much is. It's just that we should think big and plan. Think big and plan in a strategic way. Mars is also about strategy. By the way, Saturn for sure is. Mars is also about strategy. And then another way we can see strategy is when we see Mercury, which is ruler of Gemini, in Gemini at 0 degrees. And so it's really about thinking things through in a way that's quite clear. Strategizing to the point of at least having a sense of a plan B, or having a sense that that this is the right thing to be doing right now, and not falling into the trap of wishful thinking or delusion, or worse than that is being deluded by other people or other instances, other organizations. I think whatever emerges today and around this time, around this, I'm going to give it the whole week, because it's not just today, this full moon, but it's also the days around it, and then the days ahead for different reasons I'll come up to. We want to be listening carefully to what we're being told. I think we've really seen that very strongly since 2011, when Neptune moved into Pisces in the first instance, which I think was March of 2011 for the first time. And when Neptune moves into Pisces, it's just this wash of confusion. And so I've been saying again and again at different times when that energy of Neptune is connected to any of the lunations or any of the other transits that are important to follow, I've been saying just pay attention to what is being said and who is saying it and why. Follow the money. cui bono, and find out what it is that might be motivating the information that you're getting before you trust it, because we sadly do live in an era where trust is pretty thin on the ground for good reason. And so we really have to fall back on ourselves and be in this place where we can recognize that the actions that we want to take are of service to ourselves, and therefore we can bring that service outward. So they have to also work for us, not in a selfish way, not in this way that I was describing of, you know, this Aries energy that can tend to be a little bit selfish as well, and that energy of the Sun Saturn and Moon Saturn configurations, which can also tend to provoke a bit of self-centeredness. It's more about being self-aware, recognizing what it is that we need to do for ourselves, and based on that, then taking action that will also contribute something to the wider world. Pisces is very much about the collective. We see Neptune in Pisces. It's very much about that unconscious of the collective. It's where we have Aquarius is the awareness of the conscious collective. We have, you know, what we can see of society around us. And Pisces is very much that collective energy that we don't see, that we're participating in anyway. And so both of those planets are telling us something that is really important in terms of how we participate in the world around us. I feel that we need to become much more self-aware. This coincides with this moon energy, but that's of course ongoing, right? That's a life project. That's what we're here for. So yeah, this is again about having that optimism, having that desire for change, having that desire for living fully, embracing life, and then also making a difference in the world around us, at the very least, doing no harm. That's the goal, I should hope, without also falling into this polarization or this nebulous kind of confusion that Neptune might bring up. What's really interesting about this particular moment, not just this moon, but this particular moment in astrology, is that we have a lot of planets in very good dignity, and that's quite rare, because you'll see that they're quite spread out throughout the chart. And so the moon is not in particularly good dignity. Moon in Sagittarius is a little bit too all over the place, although it's not uncomfortable there, but the moon is not, doesn't thrive in Sagittarius so much because it's a little bit spread thin. But we do have Saturn, which rules Aquarius and is in Aquarius until the 6th of March or 7th of March of 2023. We also have Neptune, which is the modern ruler of Pisces, and it's in Pisces, and that's there for at least another 2 years till 2024. Jupiter is not in particularly good dignity. It's kind of neutral in Aries. It doesn't do too badly, but it's not in particular dignity. But Mars rules Aries, so Mars is very, very strong. We also have Venus. Venus is ruling Taurus, and so also in quite good dignity, very strong at this time. Venus has just come off a conjunction with Uranus, which happened about 3 days ago. I think it was the 11th of June. And she's moving towards a conjunction with the North Node, and that should happen on the 18th, which will be very interesting, something very new and dynamic, something very interesting happening potentially in your relationship experience or in the experience of women, again, as I referred to with Roe v. Wade, but it's of course not just that, just that's maybe the most prominent one in terms of headlines. And then there's also the markets. Venus represents the markets. Venus represents everything to do with money markets, finance, and so on, especially in Taurus, very much to do with food as well, and all the things that are involved in getting food to us. So look for something different, something expansive, something new, shaking things up in the few days ahead. And when Venus conjuncts the North Node in Taurus, you might want to buy a lottery ticket. Why not? You never know. especially if you've got some placements around there, around that 22-degree mark, then you might find that you have some good luck. And then also that, by the way, that placement of the North Node in Taurus is also, it just happens to be where Johnny Depp and Amber Heard have their natal Venus. So you can see how the last couple of weeks have been pretty intense in terms of Venusian topics there, in terms of the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial, and which is, again, Venus is all about love, sex, and money, and Rahu, or the North Node, is very much about something new, something different, something disruptive coming in. There we had it in one go, basically. And then we have another planet in good dignity to carry on with that theme, which is that Mercury, which rules Gemini, is just backing into Gemini, rather moving forward into Gemini after having retrograded past this point. And it went all the way in to the end of Taurus, and now has gone back into Gemini. So it'll continue that journey for the next 3 weeks or so. And so when Mercury is in Gemini, we do also have much more fluidity in terms of connection with our communications and how we connect with each other, speaking, writing. Commerce of all kinds is highlighted, so a good time also for that. This doesn't tie directly into the this full moon, except that Mercury does rule the sun, and so by rulership, Mercury is very strong, and so that emphasizes also this aspect of the conversation, or the polarity between the sun and the moon at this time, at the full moon. With regards to thinking about and communicating about and taking decisions on what it is that we want, what is our big goal, what's the big vision that we hold. And so I want to finish up with just I had written down here some of the dates. Yeah, so this is a really interesting time for people who enjoy looking out the window or looking up at the stars, actually. In real life, if you have a nice clear sky in the second half of June, you're going to really enjoy this, because as you saw this lineup of all the planets that I was showing you, Saturn, and we've got Jupiter and Mars and Venus and Mercury, they are all lining up in the sky in this way. So what we're seeing here is just a tableau of the sky at this moment, and they're all lining up in the sky. And if you, from this point on till the end of June, roughly, if you look at the sky in the eastern or southeastern area of the sky at dawn and dusk, so the sunrise, sunset, but just before sunrise, just after sunset, when it's kind of twilight, you want to have just enough light that you can see the stars, and just enough dark that they shine above urban lights, for example. And you'll see them over the horizon at that area, in that area, eastern, southeastern area. And so you're going to see all of those planets lined up in a kind of a row. If you're into taking pictures of that kind of thing, or if you know anybody who is, this is a really great time to get out there. And it's also rare to see all of these inner planets being Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the outer planets so close together, so Jupiter and Saturn close to them all. So that's all already something really quite interesting. And Pluto and Uranus are too far away. They can't be seen. Neptune, same thing. They can't be seen by the naked eye, but just up to Saturn, we can see those planets if the conditions are right. And so you will see also periodically the sun will come and join each of those planets. So for example, on the 18th of June, you're going to see the moon conjoin Saturn. And on the 21st of June, you'll see the moon conjoin Jupiter. That also happens to be the solstice, which is a very interesting time of year. And I'm going to post again about the solstice, because that's like an imprint of the next 6 months. And so it's always interesting to look at those equinox and solstice points. The equinox and solstice points, incidentally, are how we actually get the zodiac. It's how we get the horoscope wheel, they are fixed at these points, at what are called the cardinal points, which gives us the construction of a chart. And that's what makes them quite interesting from an astrological point of view. And so on the 22nd of June, just the day after the solstice, we have Mars, which is conjunct the moon, and then Venus is conjunct the moon on the 26th, and then finally Mercury will be conjunct the moon on the 27th. And so you'll see that all of those planets that you can see visibly will be highlighted as the moon moves through. Now, by the time Mercury and the moon are conjunct, the moon is going to be quite small, because now we're moving into the new moon, so it'll just be a sliver of the moon. So you have to look really closely. It'll be easier to see in this coming week, because the moon is still going from full to its waning third quarter. So I think that's all I wanted to say. That's pretty much it. So go back in time, go back to December of 2020. What were you planning on? Were you planning on any government insurgency? Were you planning on changing your life? Were you railing against the system? Were you railing against injustice? Were you thinking about government? Were you thinking about how things manifest themselves in our world? And how you'd like to see that be different. And remember, that was a time where we were still in the midst of COVID confusion, and still not yet with this vaccine. The vaccines were kind of verging on coming out. Everyone had great hope in that, or many people did in any case. And then there were also a lot of skeptics who were, by the way, very quickly shut down. And what's very interesting is that relative to that, is that right now we're seeing actually very mainstream people, including big mainstream institutions like Johns Hopkins University, for example, speaking out against efficacy of vaccines, and especially their use in children. Now, that would have had you shut down and locked away a short year ago. And certainly in December of 2020, that would have been considered to be heresy. So we can see how these things, it's like really about speaking to truth, speaking to power and influence. These are big themes right now. What action do you want to take? What do you want to do around your own healing and around contributing to healing? And what do you need to heal? And also, where do you need to take your foot off the pedal in terms of maybe even being driven to improve, self-improvement, healing, and all of that kind of thing? And can you take that as it comes? Can you be more in tune with cycles and with nature, and not forcing, as Mars in Aries would want to do? Can you practice taking action in a more inspired way, more intuitive, perhaps? I would say Mars in Aries is very instinctual rather than intuitive, which is not necessarily problematic. It's just that it's going by the gut can sometimes mean that you jump a little too soon, and so that's definitely something to contemplate in your own experience. And I just want to close with an absolutely beautiful passage from David Hawkins' book, Along the Path to Enlightenment, which I think it's really interesting. It kind of sums up a little bit about the flavor of this full moon. And he says, "The world is actually entertainment. Like amusement, it's meant to be worn lightly. Heaven is within and is revealed by awareness. The world is merely an appearance. Its melodrama is an artifice of the distorted sense of perception. It leads one to think that the world is large, powerful, and permanent, and that the self, with a capital S, is small, weak, and transitory. Exactly the opposite is true." So on those wonderful words of inspiration, I'll leave you, and I hope you enjoy this full moon. I hope you can see it through clear skies, so the big bright moon that's there for us all to see. And I hope you enjoy watching the planets in the sky in the days to come ahead. And I'll catch up with you another time.